Let's bring in our panel. We're joined now by Kobi Michael. He's a senior researcher at the Institute for National Security Studies and the former head of the Palestinian desk at the Israeli Ministry for Strategic Affairs. Bar-Yoshafat is the deputy director of Kohelet Policy Forum and was a candidate for the New Right Party of Israel. And Ali Abu Nimah is the co-founder of electronicintifada.net and author of The Battle for Justice in Palestine. Gentlemen, thanks for joining us. Kobi, is Netanyahu going to get a fifth term?
Yes, of course. I mean, there is no doubt about it. The question is how long is going to be this term? And I'm not sure that it's going to be so long because Netanyahu faces two major problems. The first one is, of course, the allegations against him and the resumption of the process in this regard. And the second one is the ultimate deal. And I think that Netanyahu is going to face some major problems, at least with one crucial partner of his new coalition, trying to convince them about the ultimate deal. I think that it will be a pretty hard job for him.
Okay, so Ali Abu Nimah, Kobi mentioned the allegations against him, talking about the corruption allegations. These didn't come out after the election. They were there for everybody to see. What the Attorney General had said was before the election anyway. So we look at Israeli politics. Labour seems to be dead and buried. They only got 6 seats. Everybody looked at it and they said there's a centrist coalition of blue and white. And if Netanyahu's talking security, well, here's 3 former IDF chiefs of staff up against him in opposition. And he's got these massive corruption allegations. Despite all of that, he's still on the cusp of becoming prime minister. What does that tell you about Israeli politics in 2019, Ali?
It tells us what we already knew, which is that Israel continues to lurch from far right to even more extreme right. You have a government that is made up of war criminals and killers and racists, and you have an opposition that is made up of war criminals and killers and racists. Let's not forget that Benny Gantz, Netanyahu's main opponent, was Netanyahu's partner in waging the 2014 51-day massacre in Gaza, in which they killed together 551 children, 11 children a day. And Benny Gantz is facing a war crimes case in the Netherlands. He would be very hesitant to get on an aircraft to any countries in Europe. And so for Palestinians, it doesn't make a difference whether it's Netanyahu or Benny Gantz. What we see from the election is that there is no self-correction mechanism in Israel, that any hope for peace and justice has to come through isolating this apartheid regime, in which we saw an election in which only half of those who live under Israeli rule are entitled to vote. Millions of Palestinians are caged in ghettos in Gaza, are surrounded by settlements in the West Bank. The settlers vote in the West Bank, but Palestinians don't get to vote for the military regime that rules every aspect of their lives. So this confirms that Israel is continuing to consolidate its apartheid system, to consolidate extreme right-wing Jewish ultranationalism, in which Israel is ever more confident in colonizing land, annexing land, and the end game ultimately for this regime is to get rid of the Palestinians altogether.
Bar-Yoshafat, I'm assuming you disagree with Ali. Come in, give me your take on the elections.
Well, I'm very happy that in Israel we have an elections, because for the Arabs in Gaza and the Arabs in Judea and Samaria, well, they haven't had an election for over a decade. But anyways, to say that Israel is becoming less democratic or more right-wing, the Likud just got more seats, and the seats that it received came from the more right-wing parties. So obviously that's nonsense. But for the rest of the accusations, if Ali Abu Nimah wants the Arabs of Judea and Samaria to have the same rights as Jews in Tel Aviv, he's actually saying that he wants to implement the Israeli law over Judea and Samaria, which is what the more right-wing parties in Israel suggest. I'm going to ignore all of the nonsense about massacre and killing people, because obviously it's the exact opposite. It's the Arabs of Gaza who are trying to every day murder.
551 children is not nonsense.
Who are murdered by Hamas. Of course they're not nonsense. They were murdered by Hamas. Hamas literally murdered 200 children when they forced them to dig tunnels. And right now, as we speak in Hamas, in Gaza, because there are riots, you have Hamas literally shooting civilians. But, the concept of election, it's a novel.
This is a great example of the right-wing
extremism
of you interrupting
me in the middle of my speech. That's exactly
won't even use the word Palestinians. He talks about the Arabs of Judea and Samaria because he doesn't want to use the word Palestinian.
Okay.
He doesn't recognize the existence of Palestinians.
Okay, Rambar.
I don't recognize you as a nation, of course not. But the elections, with all due respect, are not the nations.
Ali, give him a second. Ali, give the man. Okay, give the man a second. So,
of the extremism and racism that defines Israeli politics today, he doesn't recognize Palestinians as a people or a nation. He doesn't recognize them as having any rights. So this is, in fact, very helpful.
We have Arabs in the Israeli parliament, and you're just interrupting me.
Okay, go ahead, Ron Bar-Yoshafat.
We have, actually, we have several Arab parties in the Israeli parliament. We also have a lot of Arabs in Israel who are Muslims and Christians.
You wish they weren't there.
Who's saying I wish? Did I say I wish they weren't there? You're just putting words in my mouth. That's really not true. Please let me finish my sentence. It's really not.
Okay, listen, gentlemen. I'll tell you what. There's an additional technical problem here. Hold on, gentlemen.
You have the Arab.
If we can take a breath for a second, it's even harder. It's hard when.
Let me ask your guest. Do you recognize Palestinians as having the right to exist?
I want to finish my sentence.
Ali and Ron, there's an additional technical issue here because when you're both on Skype, it makes it even harder because your audio tends to cancel each other out, right? So, Ron Bar-Yoshafat, finish your point. Ali will come back to you, but Ron Bar-Yoshafat, go ahead.
In Israel, we have Arab parties. Not only do we have Arab parties, we also have Arab Israeli citizens, Arabs who are Muslims, Arabs who are Christians, who are also running for the elections, not just from the Arab parties, but also from the right-wing parties. You also have Arab Muslims who are running for Likud. You also have Arab Muslims who are running for more right-wing parties. By the way, in Hamas, you would never find a Jew, or under the Palestinian Authority, you will never find a Jew, because that's where you will find the real apartheid. Jews are not allowed in Gaza, and Jews are not allowed in Judea and Samaria. But in Israel, a democracy, again, the concept of election, which hasn't taken place for the Arabs of Gaza or the Arabs of Judea and Samaria for over a decade, I guess it's a novel concept. I do think that the death of every child is horrible. The only problem is that the finger is pointing at the wrong direction. When Hamas is forcing 200 children to dig tunnels and they die while they dig these tunnels for Hamas, that is a war crime.
Okay. Now, let me go back to Kobi Michael here for a second. Ali, I'm going to come to you, right? Kobi Michael, one of the points that Netanyahu made, and one of the reasons why we cover this on an international channel, is because in the build-up to the vote, very close to the vote, he tells Channel 12 that he's going to annex the West Bank settlements. They're illegal under international law. They're at the heart of the dispute, and they're at the heart of the occupation. And he says, who says we can't take them? We're going to annex them, right? Is he going to do that, and what will that mean?
I don't think so, but before replying your question, I would like to address very shortly some of the things that were said by Ali. Most of them are just empty slogans, but I would say that the Arab residents, the Arab citizens of Israel, have at least partial responsibility for the results of the last elections due to their decision not to participate in the elections. If they would have participated in the elections in the percentage of the last elections 4 years ago, the picture was totally different. So I think that they have a sort of responsibility in this regard as well. Now, with regard to the annexation, your question, I think that everybody, or almost everybody, understands that Netanyahu's declaration about the annexation was a sort of lip service in order to gain more voters and more people from the right, which is right to the Likud. I think that Netanyahu knows pretty well that the annexation will not work in favor of Israel. I think that he understands what would be the consequences and the ramifications of unilateral annexation. I think that he knows pretty well where he lives, and he knows what is the neighborhood and what are the characteristics and the nature of the neighborhood that he lives in. And I think that if we want to understand what is the real policy and strategy of Netanyahu, we have to look and see what Netanyahu has done in the last 4 years vis-a-vis the Gaza Strip. And I think that he was very constrained and very calculated, and I assume that this will remain his strategy in the soon future.
Ali, when Netanyahu says he wants to annex the settlements, do you take him at his word, or do you think, okay, well, maybe the Israeli analysts are right, maybe it's just lip service ahead of the election?
No, I never look at what Netanyahu or other Israeli leaders say. I look at what they do, and the fact remains that Israel continues to consolidate its occupation and colonization in the West Bank, of course, with a green light from its allies, including the Trump administration, the European Union, and the Saudi regime, which is now a close ally of Israel, who are either giving open or tacit support to Israel as it continues to confiscate Palestinian land and build settlements. So that's the reality. What Israel calls it is of no interest to me. What I look at is what Israel does. So, for example, as Israel was having its election yesterday, the military regime in the occupied West Bank announced the confiscation of several hundred dunams of land from Palestinian farmers in the Jordan Valley to build more roads for Jewish-only settlements. I'm sure that's something that some of your guests would greatly welcome and celebrate. But that's the reality on the ground. We look at facts on the ground, which Israel continues to create. We look at the siege of Gaza, where 2 million people are caged in a large ghetto solely and exclusively because they're not Jewish. Of course, if Palestinians were Jews, Israel would tear down the watchtowers. It would tell the snipers that are murdering children in Gaza to stand down, and it would welcome them back to their lands. But as an apartheid state, Palestinians are kept in the Gaza ghetto solely and exclusively because they are not Jewish. And both of your guests, of course, we have a rather lopsided panel, so I want to take a moment to respond. Both of your guests try to dismiss what I say as slogan and nonsense. Of course, when I talk about 551 children killed in Gaza, it's not me talking, it's the independent UN Commission of Inquiry. When I talk about children being killed over the last year in Gaza, intentionally killed, it's not me, it's the newest UN Independent Commission of Inquiry, which called for arrests of Israeli leaders who are responsible for ordering snipers to kill protesters, unarmed protesters, in the Gaza ghetto. So these are the facts. And of course, I know the response from the guests. It will be, oh, the UN, it is biased. The UN, it's anti-Semitic. It's full of anti-Semites who hate Jews. But the fact is, Israel and extremists like the ones on your panel who don't even recognize the existence of Palestinians cannot keep claiming that the entire world is wrong, only they are right, and that Palestinians must live for another decade or 2 decades or 3 decades without any rights. Of course, there aren't elections under a military occupation. The French did not have elections under military occupation. And I want to say that, we hear these slogans all the time attacking the Palestinian Authority. I'm no fan of the Palestinian Authority, but I'll tell you who the biggest fans are of the Palestinian Authority. It's the Israeli government, because despite their attacks on the Palestinian Authority and their slogans against it, the Israeli army, the Shin Bet, the occupation forces continue to cooperate very closely with the Palestinian Authority, who are their main asset in maintaining the occupation. And the last thing Israel would want is an election in which its allies in the Palestinian Authority are defeated. Because when that happened last time, Israel suppressed the election result.
Ron?
We all know it.
Okay, Ron?
Well, the only thing I will agree with Ali Abu Nimah, which I think should get a trophy for the amount of lies he just said, is that let's destroy the Palestinian Authority. I think it's a horrible institute. I think it's a terrorist institute, which basically says
they're going to give. I didn't say let's destroy.
Please stop interrupting me. You just. I've heard the amount of lies that you said, and I think you really deserve a prize for being #1 liar in the world. But I would like to answer. And the thing is that the Palestinian Authority.
You can't refute one fact I stated.
I will, because if it were as horrible as you said, we wouldn't have a conflict. We would conquer Gaza in an hour. We don't want to do it because we don't want to harm the innocent civilians who are in Gaza, who are right now being harmed by Hamas. You want me to disprove what you've said? You said you don't have elections in Gaza. You had elections in Gaza. That's how Hamas gained power. But after they gained power, they stopped having elections. You say you don't have elections under the PA? That's how the PA got power. They had elections. Mahmoud Abbas, Abu Allah was elected, and then you've never had elections. I can continue in dispute. I can continue to dispute all of your lies. I can continue to dispute all of your lies, but you're not letting me speak.
Okay,
you're being very rude.
Ali, give the man a chance. Ali, give the man a chance.
He just said that people cannot see his lies, but when I do, he interrupts me. So let me finish.
Give the man a chance, Ali. Go ahead, Ron.
The Palestinian Authority pays 5 times more money if you murder an Israeli and you sit in the Israeli prison. It's a terrorist organization, and that's why they continue to win in their non-elections.
This is not worth listening to. It's not worth listening to. It's not worth our time to listen to this propaganda from somebody who admits
you're a propaganda machine.
Palestinians don't.
And I just want to add a few historical facts. There was never a state called Palestine before 1948. There was nothing with a Palestinian connotation that didn't mean Jews. Under Hamas, they say in their charter to murder Jews wherever they are.
Israel.
Listen, gentlemen, I want to bring it back to the very beginning. Hold on, I want to bring it back to the very beginning. Kobi Michael. Okay. Okay, listen. I mean, we're going to go down this rabbit hole, and we could go on forever and ever. Kobi Michael, I want to bring you in. With regards to these elections, as the coalitions start to happen now, the most likely coalition seems to be that Netanyahu gets his right-wing coalition, and that will mean what for the foreseeable future, Kobi? Final answer.
As I told you before, I think that it's not going to be a very long and sustaining future, because as I mentioned, I think that Prime Minister Netanyahu is going to face at least 2 major obstacles. One is the ultimate deal, Trump plan, and the other one is the allegations against him. But I think that this coalition will be able, in its short time, even of 1 year, to do some things that will affect the internal issues, the domestic issues, much more than the external issues. But maybe in a very paradoxical manner, I think that this coalition, and maybe Netanyahu, after the support that he gained in this election, I think that we might reach to a sort of a calm agreement with Hamas in the Gaza Strip, and it will be maybe a bit easier for Netanyahu to reach to such an agreement.
Okay, that could be interesting. Okay, that could be an interesting paradox if it does happen, because security and being tough on Gaza was central to his electoral campaign. Listen, I'm out of time, gentlemen. Look forward to having you back on the program. Kobi Michael, Bar-Yoshafat,
Ali Abu Nimah kept interrupting. Thank you very much.
Thanks for joining us.